Greetings and salutations, and thank you for clicking on the video. Today I'm going to show you how you can upgrade your Linux distribution or change distributions while still keeping all of your data on the computer. And this is really great to know how to do if you want to just like move from Ubuntu 14.04 to 16.04, or in the case of Linux Mint, you might want to move from 17.3 to 18 when it comes along. There's talk about that they're going to might be able to come up with an in-place upgrade for that major change from the 17 series to the 18 series. But if they don't and you want to upgrade, you're going to have to actually reinstall the operating system to get to the latest one. And this is also good if you want to switch distributions. So let's say, for instance, that you're running Ubuntu with the GNOME desktop. So you're running Ubuntu GNOME, and you decide that you want to run Fedora with the GNOME desktop. Well, you can do this, and you can keep all of your settings, and when you reinstall the system, it will all just show up. This does not replace a backup, gang. This is not, I would not recommend endeavoring to do this and not taking the step to back up all of your data before you do this, because if you make a mistake or it doesn't go right, you could lose everything on the system. So this will save you some time because you won't have to copy all of the data back into the computer once you reinstall and reset everything up, and all of your settings and bookmarks in your browsers and all that stuff. You won't have to do it, but you do want to back all that stuff up. So look at my videos on backups. Today we're going to focus on Linux Mint, and I'm actually going to install in a virtual machine Linux Mint 13, which is actually still being supported since that was a long-term support released based on Ubuntu 12.04. It's good until April 2017. So in today's example, we're going to upgrade Linux Mint 13 to Linux Mint 17.3. But all of the principles apply no matter how you're going to do this, and we'll talk more about it as we roll along. The first thing that you need to do to be able to do this is set up your system so that you can. If you install Linux on your machine and then you just choose the option where it tells you that it will partition the drive for you automatically, it'll create one big partition for the entire system to live in, okay? And that partition will contain your home folder, your boot folder, everything will all go in one space, which is fine. The system will run just fine that way. But when you want to do an upgrade, the only thing that you will be able to do is to just wipe the drive and reinstall the system. So you'll have to restore all of your data and put all your settings back and all that stuff manually. So when you install Linux for the first time, we're going to use a partition scheme that will facilitate the ability to upgrade or replace the distribution and keep all of the user data. So this is Linux Mint 13's installer here, but they all kind of ask the same question, especially in the Ubuntu family, whether you want to have the system install alongside of what's already there, you want to erase the disk, or if you want to do something else or partition manually. So we're going to partition manually today. I'm going to show you how to set up these partitions. So here we go, and I cannot resize this screen, this little window. It's kind of is what it is. I guess that's because I'm running in a virtual machine, or it's turned off in the installer. I'm not really sure what the deal is. So push your chair up a little closer and get a little closer to the screen. In this case, this virtual machine already has Linux Mint installed on it, and when I installed it originally, I chose the option to allow the system to automatically partition the drive, and what it did was it created one big happy partition through all of the files in there, all of the folders for the entire system, and then it created a swap partition at the end of the drive. And so we're going to do this in such a way that we can actually have access to parts of the system in separate partitions, which will make it a lot easier. So let's create a new partition table. This will start from scratch. And we just click on the free space here, click again, and now we can create partitions. So the first partition that we are going to create is going to be very small. It is a primary partition. It has to be. And it is 512 megabytes. I have to clear that out first. Hold on. Here we go. 512 megabytes, which is really more than you need. It's like double what you need, but just in case, we don't want to ever have our little boot partition running out of space. That might cause us some major heartburn down the road. We want this to be a primary partition, and we are going to make it ext2. The ext2 file system is an older file system for Linux, and it's very good for very small drives. It does not have journaling, so therefore it has very little overhead, and it has very fast reads and writes, and it's extremely reliable. So that's why I'm choosing that. And then for the mount point, we're going to choose boot, and we're going to create that first partition. Next, we're going to click on the free space again, and now we're going to make this a primary partition. I don't usually ever create logical partitions, except for maybe the last partition on the disk, and that's if it's a very large disk and I might want to add a partition later. So for this partition, which is going to be where the system lives, if this was a real big drive, then I would go ahead and give this about 25 gigabytes of space. But since this is just a little virtual machine drive, I will give it 15 gigabytes, which would be more than enough to run the system if you didn't add a lot of stuff to it. This will be ext4, which is chosen by default, and then we are going to make that the / or root partition. So we'll go ahead and create that. Click on the free space. Now it's time to make a swap partition. And the swap partition is a little bit more than the memory that you already have installed in the computer. If you have a great deal of memory in the computer, like 8 gigabytes or more, you could make this just a little 2 gigabyte partition. The system would probably run fine. But if you have 8 gigabytes or under, then I suggest go ahead and allocate the memory size plus a little bit more. And I know some people say don't use a swap partition, you don't need it. That's not true. Some programs do need it, and the system needs a swap partition to be able to go to sleep and hibernate properly. So we're going to make that 2000. We're going to make it primary. Choose swap area from the list. There's no mount point for a swap area. So there you go. There's the swap partition. And then the rest of the disk, we're going to go ahead and allocate everything that's on the disk. This is your home partition. And it's very important that this is the last partition on the disk, okay? Because there are a couple of reasons for that. First of all, if you ever want to clone this hard drive and then put a bigger hard drive in the computer, then what you'll be able to do is clone it, and then you can just increase the size of the home partition. If you have a swap partition at the end of your disk, you can't really increase the size of the home partition, which is what you're worried about. That's where your personal data lives. So you want to make sure that your home partition is the last on the disk. I'm going to make it primary, and yes, this means that we have 4 primary partitions on this disk, and that means that we cannot go back and add any partitions later because the master boot record is basically full. If I would choose to create a logical partition, it would actually create a 4th partition, which is a logical partition with more partitions in it. And then I could go back and repartition that disk later. But in my case, I know for sure that I'm never going to want to add another partition to this disk. So we're going to choose all of the remaining space, which, because this is a very small drive, isn't much. And we're going to mount that to home. Now, if you are actually installing Linux on a computer that has like an old 40 gigabyte hard drive in it, and that's it, I don't recommend doing this because, number one, it's inefficient. It's a waste of space because now we have like space in the boot partition and the root partition where it's not going to be able to write files to if it's in the home partition. So if it's a very small drive, just throw everything in one big partition. It's more efficient that way. But any drive that's over like 160 gigabytes or something like that should be partitioned this way. And we are talking about drives, computers that do not have EUFI or Secure Boot enabled, because that requires special partitioning, and I usually just turn that off anyway. I never use it. So if you're dealing with a computer that does have that on, and for some reason you want to have that on, you can't disable it, then I'm not sure exactly how you would do what I'm doing in this video today. It's not impossible, and it can be done. I just don't know how to do it, because the first thing I do with a computer, if I'm going to load Linux on it, is turn all that crap off, because I really don't see any benefit in it at all. So we have our partitions laid out, and as you can see, all of the partitions that will contain data are going to be formatted. That's important. Make note of that. And the bootloader is going to go on the one hard drive that's in the machine. So this is ready to install. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this loose, and it's going to go ahead and start installing the system. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and install this system. And while it's getting itself set up, I'm going to pause the video here in a minute or two. Then once we get it set up, we're going to back up the programs we installed. I'm going to show you the tool that you would use to back up your data in Linux Mint. This is Linux Mint specific. Okay? And then we will attempt to upgrade. So let me go ahead and get my information in here. And it doesn't matter what I call it. And I'll give it a super safe and easy password. And now I'm just going to go ahead and let the system roll on. Before we do, there is a note that I need to make. If you choose this option to encrypt your home folder, we will not be able to do what we're going to do in the next part of this video. And the reason why is because this encryption links the home folder to the operating system that's running the system. This is a good idea if you're really worried about somebody coming in with a USB stick that has some sort of operating system on it, booting up your computer and trying to steal your data. They won't be able to do it, because unless the native operating system is running, then the home folder is encrypted. They will not be able to read it because the keys are associated with the native operating system. Nice feature here, but it doesn't allow you to later on actually replace the operating system without having to reload the entire home folder. And it does give you a hit on performance as far as that's concerned, because everything is encrypted and everything has to be checked with a key before it can be read or written. So that's something to keep in mind. So I'm going to go ahead and continue here. We're going to let Linux Mint 13 continue to install on this system. And then once it gets installed, I will reboot it to the desktop. We'll make some changes. We'll back up some files. And then we will upgrade the system. So hang around. Okay, Linux Mint 13 is installed and up and running happily in the virtual machine, and this is what the desktop looks like. So what I want to do is make a couple of changes to this desktop, and then we can add a couple of pieces of software as well, and I'll show you how to use the special Linux Mint backup tool to move from one version to the next, or be able to reload your machine. So let's see, the first thing that I want to do is, it's not here, this is the older version, so I've got to go find the other settings program. Okay, let's just go to brightness and lock, and then I can go to all settings, and then I will be able to change the appearance. Let's just choose another background. I'm just trying to make the desktop a little bit different here. That's all I'm doing. So we've got a nice new background there. And that way when we reinstall, we'll be able to see that our settings stuck. And let's see, if we go to desktop here, then I can go ahead and take this computer icon off the desktop, because I don't need that. And we've put the network on there. Okay, so that's fine. So there's our settings. And let's go ahead and open up the Software Center. We'll add a couple of programs just so we can use the backup tool to save our program list. So we'll open up the software manager and let's see, what should we install? I mean, we can install most anything. Let's see if BleachBit is in here. That's a good one. This is the older version though. Yes, there is a version of BleachBit. So let's go ahead and install that. Oop, that's not going to work because I typed in the wrong password. Okay, so we'll install BleachBit. That's installing. It should let me search for something else. So we'll put in, I don't know, let's put the Chromium browser in here. Chromium. There's the Chromium browser. So let me go ahead and get that. I'll put a couple of things in here because you don't usually use the system exactly as it comes to you. So you're going to be adding software. Yes. So that is installing, and once that gets installed, I will show you the tool that you use to create a backup of all of the software that is on your Linux Mint system. So if you're going to move from Linux Mint 17.3 to 18 when it comes along, you can do this exact same procedure. It's not 13 to 17.3. They are talking about creating a utility that will allow you to do an in-place upgrade from 17.3 to 18, but in case they don't, this is how you're going to have to do it. Okay, so we're all good and installed there. So let's go and find the backup tool. Ugh. What happened to my... There it is. My desktop went a little wonky. No, make it go away. I don't need that. Thank you. Gee. All right. I'm going to use the backup tool. It's going to ask for my password. And this backup tool gives us a couple of options here. So we will be able to back up files. If you had an external hard drive, then you could click on this and then you could select your external hard drive, and this will create a backup of all of your data files, and that way you can move it from installation to installation. This is a Linux Mint specific tool, gang. But if you're not using Linux Mint, you could use the backup software that comes with your distribution, or you could use GRSync to create your own backups like I do. I posted a video about that. But this is really cool. We can back up the software selection. So that's what we're going to do today. And this is a Linux Mint specific thing. And the destination, we'll put it on the desktop. That's a good place for it. And we will go forward. And now it's going to create a list of all the software that we installed in the system that wasn't necessarily in the distribution. So this is the list. And we'll go ahead and apply. You can go through and make exceptions there, but if you're just in a hurry and you just want to do your upgrade, then this is all you got to do. Okay, it says it was backed up successfully. Let's go look for the file. Where did it put the file? Let's do that again. Something went goofy there. All right, do it one more time here. Backup tool. All right, we want to back up our software. We're going to put it where? Destination. Put it on the desktop. Oh, it put it in the root folder is where it put it. Just take the long way around to do it. Okay. That's fine. Now it took it. Okay, that's what happened before. So it actually did create it. It just stuck it in the root folder. Unfortunately, that will not do us any good if we should back up the system, because we're going to replace everything in the root folder. So we definitely want it to be in our home folder, and we want it to be where we can access it. On a different drive would even be better. Let's go ahead and apply. Now we've created the file where we can use it. See? This is the kind of mistake that you guys might make, so I don't really get upset if they come up when we're doing videos. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go ahead and close, shut down this machine. We're going to pretend that we have all of our files and everything backed up. You would want to create that file before you backed up all your files, by the way, so that the backup would be on the the list of the stuff that you need to reinstall would be back on the computer if you should have to restore all of your backup files. Okay, so here we are. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and save you the agony of having to watch me boot up the virtual machine, and we're going to start the video again right when we get to where we're going to partition to install Linux Mint over top of our Linux Mint 13. So we're going to install 17.3 over Linux Mint 13. The machine is all booted up, and we are at the installation screen for Linux Mint 17.3. And here is where we need to make some very careful adjustments to make sure that we do not undo all the work we just did. We want to reinstall Linux Mint and move from Linux Mint 13 to 17.3 without losing all of our data. So you're going to choose something else here on this screen. Okay, so we will continue. Wait for it to get itself together. Now, you see here are the partitions, and it's kind enough to tell us that Linux Mint 13 Maya is loaded on the system. So, to do our upgrade, first we will choose the boot partition, and it comes up and it says do not use this partition. Well, we want to use it, so we're going to make it the ext2 file system. Remember, that's what we used before. We're going to format this partition, and we are going to make it boot. All right, give it a second to get itself together, and you'll see this little tick here. It says that this partition will be formatted. The next partition that we need to deal with is the root partition. This is where our system is going to go. We want ext4 for sure. We want to format the partition, and we want to mount that as root. Now, a swap partition we shouldn't have to do anything with because the system will automatically use it because it's already there on the disk. But I'll go ahead and click on here anyway, and it says that it's already going to use that for swap area, so we're good to go. Now, when we get to our home partition, here's where all our data is, and we don't want that to get lost. So we're going to be very carefully here. We're going to say we want to use this partition. The partition is ext4, and we want to mount it as home. But we do not want to click the option to format the partition. No, no, no. If we do that, we'll lose all our data. We'll end up having to completely reload the system anyway. So let's go ahead and go forward. And that all looks good. You can double check here, make sure that's not clicked to format. And we will install now. And it will give us this little message here and let us know which partitions are going to be formatted. So you have 3 places here to make sure that you have this correct. So do take the time to look, and don't do this when you're being distracted. Don't do it when you're on the phone or your kids are jumping down, up and down in the corner. And as long as that all looks good, and it does, we will continue. And we'll choose a time zone. It got it right. I am on the East Coast. Keyboard is US, yes. Make sure that you choose all the same settings that you chose before, and let's create our account. And we can leave the name alone there, and then we are going to put in a super safe password. Okay, and we're going to choose not to encrypt the home partition, because what if we want to do this again? Besides, I'm not exactly sure how that would work since all the data is already there anyway, so we'll just leave that one alone. And yes, I do like to have the system prompt me for a password when I log in. It just makes it a little bit easier, because if you don't do that, the moment that you click on your email or something, it'll ask for it anyway, so just give it to it up front. And it is more secure to run your system that way. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and let Linux Mint 17.3 get itself all installed, and then I'm going to resume recording when we get to the point when it's time to reboot and we can look at our Linux Mint 17.3 installation. And what we're going to see is whether we kept our files and our settings. So stay tuned. Installation complete, and now it is time to reboot the system and find out if we were able to retain our data and settings. Let's go ahead and restart the computer, and then I'm going to show you how to use the special tool that Linux Mint has to restore the software that you previously had installed on the system. When you replace the Linux distribution, all of the software that you may have added to it or configured, it's not going to be there, so we need to put it back. And if you're not running Linux Mint, you can still do this through Synaptic Package Manager, or you can just keep a list of the software that you have installed, and then you can go and get it and put it back on. And the tool that I'm going to show you is not going to show you the software that you installed either from a deb file or if you connected a PPA. These are only the applications that came from the distribution's repositories. And looks like we've kind of locked up on our shutdown here, so I'm going to go ahead and just force the issue. Happens a lot when you're doing this in virtual machines, and if it does it for real when you're installing, then all you have to do is go ahead and force shut down the machine by holding down the power button for 5 seconds or unplugging it and then restarting it. Your system is installed, it's there. So let's take the DVD out. I was actually doing this demonstration with a real DVD, and we'll start. And this is the first boot of our Linux Mint 17.3 installation that we put over Linux Mint 13. So exciting. Oh, it seems to be working. This is good. And the first boot always takes a little bit longer. And before we close this video, gang, I'll tell you about, give you a couple more tips on this, because this isn't the only scenario where you can use this, but there are some things that you need to be aware of to avoid some strange conflicts that can come up. So here we go. We're loading the desktop. It's so exciting. Alright, let's go ahead and log in. So we know the installation was successful. I don't know whether I can stand the excitement much longer. Hurry up and load. Oh my goodness. Here we go. So we have our desktop. It didn't remember our wallpaper, but that's no big deal. You can always put that back where it was. If you do your wallpaper from your own pictures, I think that it will keep that. So we do have our file that we created using the backup tool, so we know for sure now that we can reinstall the software. See if I click on that whether it'll automatically open it. No, it opens up the text editor, but that's okay. We'll just go get the backup tool and we'll do it manually. So back up. Give it my super secure password. All right, and before we do that, let me go ahead and increase the font size here, make it a lot easier for everybody to see, including me. And let's go ahead and make it 1.3. There, that is better. Okay, so what we want to do is we are going to restore software selection. We're going to tell it where to look for the file here. So we'll look in my home directory. And we'll look on the desktop. There's the file. Okay. Forward. And it has a list of everything that it could find that's in the repositories now as compared to Linux Mint 13. So every now and again it might not be able to find something. You might have installed a piece of software that's not currently available in the repositories, but if you've added a lot of software to the system, it certainly does help to go ahead and install what's there. So let's go ahead and apply. And then this is going to go out and do that. And then while it does that, I want to talk a little bit about cannot apply changes for fix broken packages first. I know what I did wrong. I need to go ahead and update this system because that's really the first thing that you need to do is run updates. So let's go ahead and do that because I was going to tell you about that. When you reinstall the system, okay, and you're just doing a reinstall. So let's say that you're running Linux Mint, and then for some reason or other you decide that you just want to reload the computer. Maybe something breaks, you can't fix it, or you just want to freshen things up a little bit, and you're going to go ahead and do this way. The first thing that you need to do before you do anything like install software or even open up the web browser is to go ahead and update the system. Because what can happen is that you will open up the software and then it won't be able to read the older configuration files. In other words, it's not downly, or rather it goes the other way. If you were running a newer piece of software and then you tried to open up an older version, it'll get confused and it won't be able to read the old configuration files. This happens a lot with browsers, it happens with email clients, and so therefore it's always good to make sure that you update the system and have it all up to date before you open anything up if you have retained the same data in the home folder. The other thing to keep in mind here is that if you move from one distribution of Linux to another, so let's say that you were running Ubuntu with the Unity desktop and you wanted to install Ubuntu with the Mate desktop on it. So you went from Ubuntu Unity to Ubuntu Mate. You may run into a situation where the two desktops, the configuration files it'll send they won't be completely compatible. So you might open something up and it'll be wonky, or it'll say it can't read the configuration file or that sort of thing. So that's something you have to keep in mind. So this really works best if you're going to just stay on exactly the same desktop. And even if it doesn't, you can usually go in and delete those configuration files and then you can get it back to where it's usable. If it's GNOME 3 type desktops, for instance, you've got GNOME 3, you've got Unity, you've got Linux Mint's Cinnamon, they are all pretty much compatible. You can go from one to the other and you might see some weird colors or things happening, but the desktop will work and all of the settings should be there. But the only time that I've ever had a major issue with this is like going from XFCE to Mate. Sometimes they kind of fight each other, and also going from Mate to Unity or a GNOME 3 based desktop, sometimes they fight each other. So those are some things to keep in mind. And what I like to do is to update the system, but do it without even loading the desktop. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pause the video. I'm going to let this system get itself up to date so we can go ahead and reinstall the software. And then I'm going to show you how to update the system without ever booting into the desktop. The system is up to date. That took a little while to do. Seems that the Linux Mint mirrors are having some issues today. Wouldn't you know it? That's because I'm recording a video, but we got it done. So let's see if that fixes our problem. I'm going to go ahead and just restart the backup tool. This is why I say do this when you can pay attention. But from this point, even if the backup tool doesn't work, you could just go back and reinstall the applications and it'll be fine. Come across something you don't have, just reinstall it. It's no big deal. Would be nice if this works though. So let's see here. Okay, so we need to go look on the desktop to get our file. And hopefully this time around it will work. And we'll go forward. And we have our list of applications. We're going to assume that that's all what we want. Now let's apply. It's doing something. Oh, it is just not going to work. Fix broken packages first. I guess that would mean I would have to go through this list and figure out what was broken. Yeah. So that turned out to be a bit of a bust, didn't it, gang? You can certainly give it a try. And if you were moving like from Linux Mint 17.3 to 18, and there wasn't so much time between the installs, it'd probably work out just fine. This particular example that we're doing today, we're moving from Linux Mint 13 from 2012, and we're trying to go to Linux Mint 17.3, which is way down the road. So not that the tool wouldn't work, but it's not going to work in this video, that is for sure. No big deal. You can go back and put your applications in manually if that doesn't work for you, but I thought I would give it a try. So before we close up the video, I want to show you how you can update your system without ever starting the desktop up. And this is a good idea, especially if you are reinstalling. Let's say that you were reinstalling Linux Mint 17.3. Well, there's a lot of updates that have come in since then. So if you just fire off the desktop and go ahead and open the thing up, then what you're going to end up with is there may be some configuration file conflicts. So we're going to show you how to avoid that. So what I'm going to do is just log out. And of course, when you first start up Linux after you reinstall, then it will present you with the login manager. So what you would ordinarily do here, of course, at the login manager is to just type in your password and log in. Well, we're not going to do that. On your machine, you would press alternate control and F1 at this point. Do not log into the desktop, and that will put you at a TTY, which is a terminal that is spun up when Linux comes up and is always available to you. And now we're going to log into the system here. And I'm going to put in my super secure password. And hopefully I typed it right. Of course, I didn't type it right. Okay, now we're all logged in. So we're at a prompt here, just like we opened up a terminal that was on the desktop. And the first thing that you want to do is to update the system. So for Debian-based systems, this would include Debian and all the Ubuntus and Linux Mint and everything else. The command would be sudo apt update. You ought to be familiar with this one. And this goes out and it reads all of the all of the repositories, and it is going to see if there's any new packages. And of course, if you just installed, there's probably going to be a bunch. In this case, there's not, because I just now updated the system. Okay, the next thing that we want to do is sudo apt dist upgrade. And this will go out and get all of the packages that need to be updated on the system. And there are a few, because Linux Mint, as you know, holds back a few packages. And if you run a dist upgrade command or distribution upgrade command, then this will actually go download them and install them on the system. So this might be a good thing to do first thing when you install Linux Mint anyway, is just to make sure that you have everything completely upgraded, and then use the update manager tool to keep up with that. And then once every now and again run this to catch any packages that Linux Mint doesn't upgrade for some reason or the other. Or you can be super safe and secure and do things the Linux Mint way. If you do things the Linux Mint way, then you're not going to upgrade those packages. That's entirely up to you. Linux Mint will run fine for years without upgrading all of those packages. So that's it, gang. Thank you for watching the video. I know this one was a little bit kind of all over the place, but this is reality. This is the way things really work. You try things and they don't work, and so you have to go to a plan B. So don't be too shocked if you do this yourself and you might run across into something that might make you scratch your head every now and again, but it's pretty easy to get yourself out of it. Sometimes when people do tutorials, they give you a step-by-step, and then the tutorial is like, you know, everything is done this certain way, and then when you do it, it actually comes up being a little bit different, which is actually more confusing. So I kind of like it when in videos like this, things don't always go exactly the way I thought they would, because hey, it's closer to reality. But I hope it did you some good anyway. Thank you for watching. Be sure and check out Easy Linux on the web. Check out Easy Linux on Facebook, and if you would, give it a like. And if you would also like to read more about Linux, do check out freedompenguin.com for lots of really cool articles from contributors such as myself. There's always something interesting to read about on Freedom Penguin. So thank you for watching.